What's up, everyone? Lou here. Today I'm going over Demonology, Warlock, and WOTLK Classic. Going to quickly go over gear, talents, and then spending most of the time into rotation and how you should be playing in T7. So starting off here in the demo tree, these are all pretty mandatory. You could change out Fail Synergy for Healthstone, but I think the healing on your pet is actually pretty relevant. Moving down here, all of these are mandatory. Some people do choose to go mana feed. I don't think it's really necessary, specifically in raid. Your pet doesn't really run out of mana in 25 minutes. This is more for like 10 man, maybe dungeon type of thing. But I just prefer to throw that extra point into improved demonic tactics. So all of these, pretty mandatory. You're going to max all of these out. And you are left with 2 extra points once you fill out your destruction tree. So what you can do with those 2 points is destructive reach, intensity, or if you're not hit capped, you can do 2 into suppression, or if you are hit capped, you can also do 2 into improved corruption. Hit cap, if you didn't know, is 14% when you have a Shadow Priest or a Boomkin in your raid. You know, every 25 mana is going to have at least one of those, so you only need to hit 14%. So technically right now I'm 0.49% over hit cap. So ideally you get that hit cap on your gear, use the extra points into, you know, either intensity or, in my preference, improved demonic tactics. Just gives your pet a little bit more damage with crit. In terms of gear, just mostly badge gear, vendor gear, some Nax gear. I guess my biggest piece would be Malgo staff, but a majority of this is pretty easy to obtain. It's mostly like dungeon stuff and whatnot. Talking about like rotation here, I'm going to always be casting life tap before the pull. I prefer Potion of Wild Magic for the extra Demonic Pact spell power. However, you could use Potion of Speed if you want to pre-pot that. You're going to open with 2 Shadow Bolts. So the travel time, because the boss is usually pretty far away. Then you want to apply your dots. And ideally, you are in melee range. So that way you can just pop all of your cooldowns, your gloves if you are engineering, which you should be, and just spamming Shadow Bolts. Refreshing your dots as they come up because you do want the Molten Core procs. And you're literally just Shadow Ball incinerating until Demon Form ends. In terms of life tapping, you only want to life tap when you're like low on mana or you have to move. You don't need to keep up this spirit buff the entire time. It's not really worth it at all. The only thing you really need to be maintaining are your dots. And making sure that your demonic empowerment is used on cooldown. You could wait until you get the demonic pact off the rip, but it doesn't really matter that much. The DPS increase isn't that big. You just want to make sure it's used on cooldown. So yeah, you're just keeping up your dots here. When it comes to Agony or Doom, I usually use Doom at least once or twice in the fight, depending on if it will cast off or not. So you want to open with it for sure, but if the boss is going to die in 2 minutes, then you know you might just want to use Agony after the first cast. Only tapping really when you absolutely have to and you're low on mana. It also gives you the added benefit of sniping replenishment from like mana cooldowns. So sometimes you'll be able to get like extra from that and you won't actually have to tap. So going into the second set of Metamorphosis cooldowns, you want to make sure that you have your dots up and you have enough mana to sustain, so you don't want to be life tapping during this at all. So you just want to be shadow bolting, incinerating. Ideally. But your dots will probably fall off at some point, like mine did here, and you will have to waste the GCD on it, but that's pretty much the rotation. Once you get into execute phase, so if the boss was, say, 30% here, you want to wait. You want to get your improved Shadow Mastery onto the boss first before you cast it. So like when he hits like 36%, you want to cast some Shadow Bolt to make sure that is pretty much up. You will pop your Flame Cap, your Potion of Speed, and your Metamorphosis, and all of your cooldowns, and you just pump Soulfires into the boss. Like repeat Soulfire, Soulfire, Soulfire. You still want to keep your immolation and corruption on the boss if they're like in the 30s and 20 percentile, but if they're like, 5% or less, you just let your dots fall off and you just keep pumping Soulfires. Whenever you do proc Molten Cores in Execute, you're still just using them on Soulfires. You're not using them on Incinerate at all. It's not a priority at all. In terms of glyphs, I'm using Life Tap, Quick Decay, and Felguard. You could take off Felguard for Glyph of Metamorphosis, so it's an extra 6 seconds. This does allow you to get an extra cast of Immolation Aura, which is pretty significant in terms of damage. But it's really up to you. I like having extra pet damage. You don't have to worry about it. It's just passive damage. And I am spec'd into my pet doing more damage, so it makes more sense to have this glyph. Yeah, in terms of consumables, if you are engineering, you should be using Serenite Bombs on cooldown. It's a 1 minute cooldown. No cast time. Nothing like that. So it's off the GCD also. So I can be casting, a Soulfire and then like throw a bomb. Right, so like it doesn't interfere with the global cooldown. Using the Flask of the Frost Farm, which is the highest spell power, obviously. Make sure you have food on your pet. And that's pretty much it. I'll do the rotation one more time, or the opener. So you want to have Life Tap up, you're pre-casting Shadow Bolts, and then you're going into your dots, popping your cooldowns, and you're just spamming Shadow Bolts. And you're using your Molten Core procs on Incinerates when the boss is above 35%. You are refreshing your dots when they are expiring. It is worth to have them up during this phase. So. No, it's my immolation miss because not hit capped on this dummy, sad. And it's just a priority system for the most part. Like when you get Molten Core procs, you want to be incinerating. When you don't have Molten Core procs, you just want to be Shadow Bolting. You do want to be watching and tracking your Shadow Mastery though. You want to make sure that is up. Because if it's not, you're losing out on just 5% crit, which is not ideal. Yeah, and you're just dumping your procs as you get them. You want to dump them as fast as you can because sometimes you might get like back-to-back procs of it and it might overlap and then you waste procs because it doesn't extend. If you have 2 procs left, it doesn't give you 5. It just refreshes the 3. So you really want to be using your Molten Core procs as they come up. That way so you don't munch them. Yeah, that is pretty much it. Demo is pretty insane right now in tier 7. It'll probably fall off in tier 8, and Affliction will kind of take its reign there. But as of right now, with like our current gear and stuff, like Demo is doing pretty insane damage, especially during execute. But that's pretty much it for me. If you have any questions, let me know. And see you next one.